On Saturday the 13th of November in 2021, a 27-year-old father named Ivie Gutierrez was supposed to be heading off for a fishing trip in Corpus Christi, Texas, when he would mysteriously disappear. At the time, he was somebody who was always in constant contact with his sister Deanna, so when he failed to respond to any of her messages that weekend, she immediately knew something wasn't right. Deanna then called the Corpus Christi Police Department a few days later to report her brother as missing. However, as he was a 27-year-old man, the police refused to act and instead told her to just sit and wait for his return. But as the weeks passed, with Ivie continuing to remain impossible to reach, Deanna's concerns only grew, eventually causing her to take the case into her own hands by talking to known friends of Ivie and asking them questions about what they knew. However, despite being provided with a number of potential leads, these stories did not seem to possess any factual evidence, and so, after over 2 years of searching, Ivie Gutierrez remains a missing person to this day. But to make matters even worse, it has also recently come to light there has been a plethora of missing person cases cropping up in and around the Corpus Christi area, which has understandably led many to wonder, could all of these similar cases be connected? And if so, what really happened to Ivie Gutierrez? Ivie Joe Daniel Gutierrez, otherwise known as JD, was born on the 21st of October in 1994 in the state of Texas, alongside his brother and loving sister Deanna. Little was known about his childhood, but from what I was able to gather, Ivie seemed to be the type of person to keep his problems to himself, as he had a deep love for his family and didn't want to cause them any worry. But outside of his troubles, Ivie was also an avid fisherman who would spend as much time as possible out on the water with his friends, and it was after meeting one of his many acquaintances that he was eventually introduced to a girl he would begin a relationship with. According to his cousin, as the relatively troubled teenager moved into his 20s, Ivie would also begin to check in on his loved ones as often as possible, as he developed a new level of maturity after bringing his first child into the world. But despite his newfound responsibilities as a father, for one reason or another, he unfortunately began to get involved in drug addiction as he was suffering from some mental health issues at the time. And in typical form, Ivie would continue to keep these struggles to himself, adamant that he didn't want to cause any panic within the family. However, it would seem that this selfless personality trait would eventually play a role in an incredibly unfortunate situation, as after being invited out by his friends for another fishing trip, Ivie would suddenly stop communicating with his family, leaving them with the assumption that he was likely going through something again. So, when he failed to return home on that fateful day in November, his sister Deanna knew right away that something was very wrong. On Saturday the 13th of November, the 27-year-old man would answer a call from one of his close friends, asking if he wanted to join them on a fishing trip that weekend. So, as Ivie was somebody who loved to fish, he immediately jumped at the opportunity and agreed to meet them over on Red Dot Pier in Corpus Christi. It is unknown if he ever made it to this location, however it would seem that later that day he would suddenly stop responding to any phone calls or text messages from his family, who were understandably concerned for his safety. At the time, Ivie had been struggling financially and was still using drugs, so he had made it a point to keep in close contact with his sister Deanna to reassure her that he was okay wherever he was. But on this particular day, every message that Deanna sent would be ignored, which was extremely out of character for Ivie and understandably caused his family to worry that he may have been in some kind of danger. So, as the days passed, with the young father continuing to stay absent, this mild concern would soon evolve into a deep fear, leaving Deanna with no other choice than to call the Corpus Christi Police Department to report her brother as missing. On Tuesday the 16th of November, the Corpus Christi PD would receive a call from a distressed woman who was concerned for her brother's safety. According to Deanna, she hadn't spoken to Ivie for a number of days, which was unusual, and given his lifestyle at the time, she truly believed that he could have been in serious danger. However, given that he was 27 years old at the time, the police refused to write up an official report for Ivie, as in their words, he was likely to return eventually, and therefore advised Deanna to just sit back and wait until he made contact. So, taking on the advice of the professionals, Deanna informed the rest of the family that there was more than likely no reason to panic, as it had only been a few days at the time, and there were many possible explanations for why Ivie would suddenly stop communicating outside of the realms of danger. But determined to get her brother home before Christmas, Deanna decided to take the case into her own hands and started reaching out to as many of Ivie's friends as possible to see if any of them knew where he could be. During this period, she was given a bunch of stories from the witnesses, but unfortunately they were unable to provide any factual evidence to back up their claims, leaving Deanna with no leads to work with, other than the fact that the last place Ivie was said to have been seen was by the Red Dot Pier in Corpus Christi. So, after gathering as much information as she could, Deanna then decided to get back in touch with the Corpus Christi detective named Alvarado and asked him if there was anything they could work with in terms of an investigation. However, despite her massive efforts, the detective once again refused to help, expressing that the police department were unable to utilize any resources in the case, given the fact that they did not have any evidence of foul play and were adamant that Ivie would return eventually. But just as Deanna and the rest of the family had suspected all along, this day would never come, as weeks would soon go by with still no sign of Ivie, leaving the family in a great deal of despair as they wondered what could have happened to their loved one. However, it wouldn't be too much longer before Deanna would finally get an update on the case, as she would receive a strange call from a supposed friend of Ivie's, who would go on to reveal something that would send shockwaves throughout the entire community. On Monday the 21st of February, just over 2 months after Ivie's initial disappearance, one of his apparent close friends would reveal to Deanna that they had been speaking to a local coroner who had found a body in the area of Corpus Christi that could not be identified. Well, as you can imagine, Deanna's heart immediately sank as she considered the possibility that this body could have belonged to her missing brother. So, determined to find out the truth, she asked for the number of the coroners and quickly hung up the phone so she could speak to the professionals herself. However, as it was President's Day at the time, she was unable to get through to the office and therefore decided to call back the following day to try again, to which she would have much more luck getting through. But despite her conversation the previous day with Ivie's friend, the coroner's office were actually surprised to receive the call and at first seemed to be very confused about what Deanna was actually asking. But after going into more detail about the situation, the coroner eventually asked her to describe her brother's appearance, to see if they had any bodies that matched the description. They then promised to call back once they'd done a quick inspection of their cadavers, leaving Deanna on the edge of her seat as she prepared herself for the worst. However, to her relief, the coroner would swiftly call back to announce that they did not have a body that even remotely matched the description of Ivie, meaning there was still a chance he was alive somewhere, providing Deanna with a small glimmer of hope once again. So, with this newfound energy towards the case, Deanna and the rest of Ivie's family gathered together from all across the country to conduct a search party, where they created and passed out flyers to the locals and asked the community for further support. But after weeks of searching with still no luck, Deanna was once again forced to go back to the police for their assistance, as Ivie had now been missing for several months at this point, and luckily, this time they agreed to conduct their own formal investigation into the disappearance. However, it would appear that this decision was already too little too late, as despite the massive efforts of everybody involved to keep the case alive, over 2 years later, Ivie continues to remain a missing person to this day. Now, unfortunately, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. But despite the rather bleak circumstances, I personally have it under good authority that Ivie's family are not giving up the fight for answers, as in recent weeks, it seems that the case has had a sudden surge in awareness due to the disappearance of another young man named Caleb Harris. However, putting this aside, you cannot deny the fact that over the years there has been very little media coverage around Ivie's case, with even some locals expressing their unawareness of the story until recently. Therefore, all we can really do at this point is continue to spread the story, hoping that it will eventually contribute to the family receiving some much needed answers around what really happened to Ivie Gutierrez. So with that, let's get into some of the potential theories. Now, to kick things off, as I usually do on this channel, I will begin by discussing one of the more positive possibilities here, as no matter how bleak the circumstances may seem, until we have irrefutable evidence proving that Ivie is no longer with us, I feel we have to keep an open mind that there is still a small chance that he may return. So, with this in mind, could it be possible that Ivie is still alive out there somewhere? Well, there are arguments to be made that Ivie could have skipped town in an attempt to start a new life. I know it's a cliche, but given the fact that there hasn't been a single piece of evidence to come out in over 2 years, this could be because there isn't actually anything to find. Perhaps Ivie felt he was a burden on his family and thought they would be better off without him, so rather than telling them where he was going, he simply disappeared on purpose to start a new life elsewhere. Now, let me just say, I'm very aware of how far-fetched this theory may sound, but given the fact that Ivie's case hasn't really received too much media attention, if any at all, maybe after all these years he hasn't even realised that his family have been looking for him. However, although I would love to continue speculating on the positive theories, there really isn't too much more to say, as outside of an intentional disappearance conducted by Ivie himself, I can't think of any other conclusion that has a happy ending. Well, except for the small chance that Ivie has been held captive all this time, just waiting to be released or rescued. But if this was the case, it would imply that he has more than likely been human trafficked, which, despite meaning he could still be with us, could also mean that he is probably trapped in a very desperate situation, where the police need to act as quickly as possible to bring him home. But without any hard evidence whatsoever to back this up, we are unfortunately left to ponder the alternative theories, which in contrast are much bleaker to say the least. So if Ivie is in fact no longer with us, what could have possibly happened to him, and more importantly, who could be responsible? Well, an important point to mention here is that Ivie didn't hang around with the safest of crowds. By all accounts, at the time of his disappearance, Ivie was struggling financially, which likely contributed to his drug addictions and mental health issues, so it would seem he had found himself living rough on more than one occasion. I can't say for certain that he was homeless at the time, but Ivie was definitely somebody who would keep his troubles away from his family, so perhaps the situation was even worse than first thought. So with this in mind, it could be possible that on the day of his disappearance, Ivie got into some kind of argument with one of his friends, and due to the type of people he was associating with at the time, it's possible that one of them could have accidentally taken his life and thrown his body into the Corpus Christi waters. Now, once again, let me just clarify that this theory is purely speculation and I have no reason to believe that this was the case outside of my own personal thoughts. But if Ivie was out on the water alone with these people, anything is possible. It could be argued that if drugs were also involved, this would have been a deadly combination for everyone that was on board that boat. It is understood that it was a friend who invited him out fishing, but we can't confirm who the other attendees would have been, so perhaps uncovering these individuals would be the key to solving this case. But once again, there is currently no hard evidence to back this up, and it must be said that the family have spoken to several people who knew Ivie and were there the day he disappeared. But the stories have not been revealed to the public, as well as their names, so for now, we can only continue speculating and spreading awareness of the case. However, speaking of awareness, Ivie's case seems to have picked up in the media spotlight recently, after it was pieced together by the Corpus Christi Chronicle that there have been several identical cases of missing people over the last few years taking place in Corpus Christi, which has led many to consider if these cases could potentially be connected. In a recent post made by the Corpus Christi Chronicle dated 15th of March this year, they explained that concern is growing along Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas, where last year saw the mysterious deaths of 5 men, followed by the discovery of a woman's body in February of this year. They then went on to add that Newsweek reported that around 2,300 people go missing in the United States every day, and as the list continues to grow, anxiety mounts among residents and authorities alike. One example of a similar case to Ivie's was a young man named Bradley Brooks, who was last seen heading out for a late-night fishing trip in August of 2019. Days later, his abandoned vehicle was discovered on Nass Drive at the Marina Village, yet Bradley remains missing to this day despite numerous extensive searches in the following years. Another example is Jesse Albert Garcia Jr., a 38-year-old man from Pleasanton, Texas, who also disappeared during a proposed fishing trip with friends in Corpus Christi. Fears of foul play immediately emerged as his family noticed his strange silence from social media and deactivation of his phone number shortly after losing communication. To this day, his grey Nissan Frontier truck still hasn't been located, and there have been no official sightings since Jesse's vanishing. But to add to the list, there is also Patrick Harris, who was last seen near Airline Road and Williams Drive in December of 2022, with the Corpus Christi Chronicle writing that his disappearance has left a void in the community, which has fueled concerns of a potential predator lurking in the shadows. But as well as all of these troubling cases, there is one which seems to stand above the rest, due to the fact that it only recently occurred a few weeks ago, which would be the strange disappearance of the Texas A&M University student, Caleb Harris. On the 4th of March, Caleb left the house with plans to go on a fishing trip with his friends in the waters of Corpus Christi, but just like the others, he too would mysteriously disappear, and in the 3 weeks since, there has been no official sighting of the young man and no leads to follow. However, one bright spark to come out of Caleb's disappearance is that he has managed to shine a light on the injustice of many other missing people across America. For example, his GoFundMe page has successfully gained over $57,000 in just 10 days, and there have been multiple news broadcasts detailing his disappearance, with the Corpus Christi police also making great efforts to uncover the truth. Whereas with Ivie's case, they initially claimed that he was an adult and therefore refused to help, telling the family to just sit and wait for his return. But on top of this, if you compare Ivie's GoFundMe page, which was set up 9 days ago at the time of recording, you will see that his page has only been able to generate $170 so far, which in my opinion, further highlights the favoritism that goes on within the police and the media. So I would like to take this time to try and make a real difference here, by asking you to contribute whatever you can to this desperate family, as I know how exhausted they must feel after continuing this search for over 2 years now. But also, I can't help but feel that this is the best opportunity to raise the attention surrounding Ivie's case, as it's only a matter of time before the media inevitably moves on to the next big story. So please, share this video and donate what you can, and hopefully we can help uncover the truth behind this tragic story. Anyway, with that, I think I'll leave this video here. But if you have any other theories of your own which you think may help explain what really happened to Ivie Gutierrez, please leave your ideas in the comments down below and I will do my best to get back to you. But until then, thank you so much for watching and make sure to subscribe to the channel for updates on these cases. Also, if you found this story interesting, feel free to check out the videos on screen now, where I cover 3 other missing person cases from Texas which to this day still remain unsolved.